Today we're going to talk about somebody you might have heard of. She was a local girl that got very famous. Her name was Annette Noble, Annette Lucile Noble. Her father was a doctor, Dr. Noble, here in Albion for years and years and years, Dr. William Noble. But Annette had a mind of her own. She went to the Albion schools, then went to Phipps Union Seminary, graduated from Phipps. Somewhere in there she developed polio, and we're not exactly sure when, but she almost always walked with a cane. Okay, this did not hold this woman down. Annette Noble wrote 30 novels. Actually, she collaborated with 3 more, so in essence, she wrote 33. She traveled to Europe, taking young ladies to Europe to show them what Europe was like 40 times in her lifetime. Now, this is a woman, I don't think there's many women today that could keep up with her. She wrote 30 books in her lifetime, collaborated on 3 more, and then traveled to Europe 40 times.
What years?
She was born in 1844 and died in 1932. She was in Europe at the beginning of World War I. It says in her obituary, her latest trip landed her in Germany at the opening of the World War in 1914, and she confessed in later years that she got the biggest thrill of her life in the evacuation ride and later race of a few miles with a companion into Switzerland when she returned to the home country. She began her career writing for publications, but they weren't just the local newspaper. She wrote for the Christian Union and the New York Independent, and later to Harper's Bazaar, and Frank Leslie's periodicals and New York Graphic in New York City. So she started out by writing articles for these state and nationally known publications. She would write stories, send them in. And in the Writer Publishing Company in 1891, William Henry Hills wrote about Annette Lucile Noble. One of the writers who have gained success during the last 10 or 12 years is Annette L. Noble. In April 1880, without a word of introduction, she sent the manuscript of her first novel, Uncle Jack's Executors, to the publishing house of G.P. Putnam and Sons. Within 10 days, she received a letter from George H. Putnam saying the story pleased him much and arranging to publish it in the Knickerbocker series. It was issued the next month and has a steady sale from that day to this. So she wrote a novel, sent it into a publishing company, and they read it and went, yeah, good, we'll publish it. This lady had gumption. She knew what she wanted to do, and she knew how to do it. Her mother was New England born and bred, a fine old family, her great-grandfather being Ezra Stiles, the Oriental scholar, 6th president of Yale College, and founder of the Redwood Library in Newport. Like I said, she contributed to magazines of the day and was at one time a Paris and London correspondent for the New York Graphic. So she was a correspondent in Paris and London for a United States publication. But this was before she published all her books. She graduated from Phipps in 1863, and that's when she started her literary work, traveling extensively in Europe, Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and other foreign countries. Her stories have been translated into several foreign languages and had a large circulation in Holland. So she wrote, but they weren't just for here in the United States. They were circulated in Europe and Asia. She, like I said, she wrote over 30 books. We have about maybe 16, 17 in the archives. 4 of them I've got up here from the 1870s to the turn of the century. These are 4 books. And when I went on the internet, seeing if anybody else had information about her, came across, you go to Amazon, you can buy one of her books today. They still have some of her books on sale at Amazon, a couple other book dealers. I was amazed to find them still being sold. And as I said, she went about 40 trips to Europe. Well, she went to Europe to take young ladies from this area to Europe to show them around so they could see what Europe was like. So she would take them on tours. In 1887, so this is fairly early in her career, it says in the newspaper, a party of Albion ladies, it is expected, will sail for Europe in the city of Richmond, leaving New York on Saturday the 14th. The party is composed of Dr. Harriet N. Watson, that was Annette's sister, Mrs. Frances A. Graves, Mrs. Helen Alice, Mrs. Francier Wilson, Miss Annette Noble, Marie Watson, Lucretia Miller, Nellie M.C. Brown, Adele Clapp, and Jeanette Bradley. The party will be joined in New York by Miss Alice Kellogg and Mary Noble. The best time imaginable is expected by members of the party and hoped for by many of the friends left behind. So that was just one trip out of 40. And this was 1887.
Now, were some of these women she took married and some single, or?
Some of these are listed as Mrs., but I wonder, sometimes they used Mrs. not necessarily because the person was married, but because they were respected. I would think the vast majority of them were single girls. But that didn't mean, now her sister was married, and she was a doctor. But she went on a couple of these European tours. And do you remember this, the diploma that I had framed that was from 1861 from a lady who went to Phipps Union Seminary here? Well, guess who else is in one of the graduation catalogs? Annette Noble is listed in one of those too. So Annette went to Phipps, and we've got her listed in one of the books as being one of the seniors in the senior year class.
Where was it?
This was Phipps Union Seminary. It sat where the treasurer's, or is that what I say? County clerk's office is.
Okay.
Only it sat a little closer to the street, but it was a similar style building. And they added on to that building at one point to put like a dormitory on it because there were girls that came here like from Vermont and New Hampshire, and so they needed a place to stay. People in the area housed some of these girls, but then there were so many girls coming that they eventually built onto the school to make housing. Her sister was educated at the Phipps Union Seminary too, and Annette's sister was Harriet Noble Watson. And the thing that gets me is they tell you that if you look in the old records of the Phipps Union Seminary, you'll see, or you'll read letters that were written by somebody, and they mention Hetty and Nettie. That's Harriet and Annette. Nettie, and Hetty were the girls in the Phipps Union Seminary. I think that's pretty cute. She was on tour, listed as her 22nd European tour, with a small party of friends, sailing just after June and entering the latter part of August. Exact dates to be given later, it said. The tour included Italy, Switzerland, Bavaria, Germany, France, and England. The cost of the tour was $575. 30 women attended the tour, sailing from New York on the SS Oceana, July 7th, 1913. I won't read them all to you, but I went through a New York State, New York newspapers database to see if she was mentioned in any newspapers. Yeah, she was mentioned in Medina newspapers, Brockport newspapers, Buffalo newspapers, and Rochester newspapers. She really became famous in her lifetime for taking these tours in Europe and Asia, or Europe and Middle European countries.
Could she have been paid by the parents to take these girls?
I don't know. It never says
It doesn't say
how she got paid. I would assume some of it was her own money from publishing these books. But I would think that they would have to pay something, you know, pay their boat, their ship fees or something, because I can't imagine she could pay for 30 people.
No, and not 40-some trips.
No.
She never married.
Never married. Nope.
That's how women...
She was so busy she couldn't fit it in. I mean, when do you have time to date, right? You haven't got time to date. You're either writing a book or going to Europe. That can't fit them in.
That's how these women accomplished so much back then, though.
That's right.
They didn't marry.
They didn't marry. Then you can't tell her she can't go.
That's right.
Yeah. In 1899, it said in the paper, Miss Annette Noble gives a talk on her trip to the Holy Land at the residence of Reverend Millspa, Albion today. So she went to the Middle Eastern areas, and she also went to the Holy Land. And some of the things I have here today, I want to show you that have been donated, starting with Swan Library. In 1901, it says Miss Annette Noble of Albion is planning for her 16th European trip. And in 1903, it says Miss Annette Noble has arranged plans for her 17th European tour. 1903, which will include famous places and byways in Italy, Italian Lake region, the Tyrol, Germany, Switzerland, France, and England. The tour will begin at Naples about the 1st of June, 1903. Miss Annette Noble in 1903 sailed Saturday from Philadelphia on the Friesland with a party for a 3-month tour of Europe.
Whoa. Nice.
Didn't just go over, check in, and come home. You spent time. Well, if she went to that many countries, it would have to take that long. And in 1914, it says Miss Annette Noble of Albion will make her 23rd European tour this summer and will conduct a party of 8. So she was still going strong, 1914. And I've got acres of articles every year about where she was going, who was going with her. She'd come back, she'd give a talk at a local church or to a group on what she saw in Europe. And then, near the end, or just after her death, things were donated to Swan Library. Now, we have an archives. The reason we have an archives is there was no museum in Orleans County to take in anything. if I had my druthers, I'd have made Sanford Church House a museum for Orleans County. We can't do that now, there's somebody living there. But there has not been a museum, and Swan Library was brand new in 1900, 1901. And it was the cutting edge in Orleans County, especially in Albion. And when somebody traveled or somebody passed away and they had important papers, where do you keep them? The family can't keep them. So they gave them to Swan Library. Now, after Annette Noble passed away, things were donated that were her personal items. They were donated to Swan Library. And I brought a few of them today. And in 1974, Swan Library did an exhibit of some of the things that she brought back. It says, a new exhibit feature, African art and costume, is now in place in the main reading room with a number of artifacts from the library's collections. Exhibited are a number of Egyptian, Arab pieces of jewelry, flutes, and a face veil. In addition, there are several beaded pieces of Nubian ceremonial dress on a mannequin lent from the Cobblestone Society. Nubian woman's beaded apron, necklace, and gourd, shell, and bead headpiece. Also from Nubia are an egg basket and a cowhide purse of recent origin duplicating patterns of basketry and leatherwork found in King Tut's tomb, containing food and gold dust. Most of these artifacts are thought to be presented to the library by Annette Noble of Albion, resident novelist and last century, who also conducted tours to Europe and the Middle East. It's presumed these objects were collected before 1914. In conjunction with these artifacts, after October 1st, the Nioga Library System will have for circulation here a collection of books on African art and costume. So that was in the paper in 1974. What I brought today, we have, what did I say, about 20 of her books, okay, that we have copies of in the archives. So here are 4 of her books, and I tried to space them out. This one is 1876. This one is 1880. This one is 1885. And this one is 1906. So they are novels that she wrote. Novels.
Okay.
Yep. And we still have more in the archives. We don't have them all. I'd love to see us have them all at some point. But because she wrote so many and so well. And I guess the thing was that she was published like by Putnam. It wasn't a small town publisher here in Albion. It was a nationally known book business that published her first novel because they thought it was so good.
What kind of a novel? She said.
Huh?
What kind of? Like a romantic novel?
They were
Detective or?
They were novels, had a little suspense in them, but didn't have killing or, beating the other person up. There was none of that violence in it. No bad talk, just a scenario that she wrote out. It amazes me that they were so popular then, but yet it's a different culture than we have today. Today people go, yeah, well. Back then it was offensive.
Well, it didn't in the early days, they didn't let women publish under their names.
That's what amazed me so, because she did get published under her own name. And the first one she sent in, they made copies and published it and advertised it.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. The other things I brought today, I think I mentioned when I read, this is the Nubian egg basket. This egg basket is like the one that was put in King Tut's tomb. This bracelet is glass, and this rosary was done with wood from the Mount of Olives. And the last thing I want to show you are pieces of linen, like those used in mummification. And she was given them by the Cairo Museum. Okay, well, I guess that's all I want to overwhelm you with today. But anybody have any questions?
Do you have a list of all of her, now I know you don't own them all, but do you have a list of all, if some of these could still be bought?
All I have is a list of things that are in the archives, supposedly from Cairo or Egypt. Some of them say Miss Noble or Mrs. Watson, which would be her sister. But there is no list that says these are all things from Carolyn Phipps or from Annette Noble or whoever. Because sometimes those things weren't written down. You know, somebody gives you something and you think, well, I won't ever forget that. You know, and you don't write it down. I've done it myself with things.
Sure, I'll remember.
I'll remember, and then they think, who the heck gave that to me? I think we've all been there. But there are a lot of things in there. This is the kind of thing that's in the archives. Are things that you just shake your head and go, I can't believe.
So did some of the stuff that came to us, is it all still here, or is it still out among?
As far as I know, whatever was given to us is still here. The only thing I haven't found is, oh shoot, well, this is like a name. What do they call it? The communication that went under the ocean.
Oh, when, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, yes.
Well, we got a hunk of it.
Oh.
I haven't found it yet.
But we do have a piece of it.
Well, according to the records, we have a piece. So there are a few things that they say we have in the records that I haven't come across yet, but that doesn't mean they're not there. We have a collection of dolls that belong to Lily and Achilles, the first librarian. We have a collection of fans, ladies' fans. There's a lot of different things that are in that archives. Yeah. We have a brick that says Newport on it.
Oh.
That was the name of Albion before they changed it to Albion. It was called Newport, the Newport on the canal.
What year did that happen?
That had to be before, 1825? I'm thinking originally when the canal first went through, when they were digging it like in the teens. This was an area, they wined and dined the canal commissioners to get them to okay Albion, but at the time it was called Newport. And I've got one brick that says Newport carved into it. But yeah, because they wined and dined them and we got to be county seat. Yeah, little razzle dazzle, probably a couple payoffs, but we got to be Albion at the county seat. Anybody else? Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.